Hello and welcome back to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. This week, we're going to talk about a part of the body that many of us have a love-hate relationship with, and that would be fat. My guest for the show today is Dr. Sylvia Terra, a biochemist who was driven to research fat, science, and lifestyle after she finally got fed up with eating less and exercising more than her slimmer friends throughout her life. In her best-selling book, The Secret Life of Fat, she reveals the complex biology of fat, how it resists loss, and what to do to remove stubborn fat. Dr. Terra holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of California at San Diego and a master's in business from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She was also a consultant with McKinsey and Company and has worked at some of the world's largest biotechnology companies. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Dr. Terra. It's great to meet you.
Great, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So let's just start with the basics. Why did you decide to write a book about fat?
That's something I have battled for a long, long time. I think really since I was a kid, I always noticed that I gained weight a lot easier than other people around me. My skinny little girlfriends back in elementary and junior high, they could sit there in their bikini and eat whatever they want, candy, cake, whatever, by the poolside, and were much leaner than me, right? And so anyway, I got very frustrated with this. It continued into adulthood where I had to really restrict calories by far more than other people, work at it much harder, while other people kind of flippantly ate all around me. So I was about to go on yet another diet, in my 40s. And I thought, I really have to understand fat. I have to stop just following everybody else's advice and learn all about my body and why I'm so resistant to fat loss. I'm a biochemist, so I had plenty of tools to go and investigate the science behind fat. And as I did it, I just became really surprised at what I was learning. I read like 1,000 articles out of the scientific literature. I talked to scientists about their research. And, fat's not just fat. And I think that was the big learning for me, the big aha moment, is that fat is a lot more complex than just a bunch of extra calories. It's actually an endocrine organ. It is releasing hormones into your body that your body depends on. And when you try to lose fat, your body works in concert to try to protect your fats because it doesn't want to lose fat. So really, once you gain, losing it is quite a battle. And even when you lose it, your body has all kinds of tools to put it right back on you because it did not want to lose that fat. So really, the best thing you can do is not gain that extra weight. Once you do, you're kind of in for a fight, possibly forever. I hate to say that, but it's better that you know the truth so that you know what to do about it than just keep on following one diet after another like I was doing in my life.
So within all of these different literature searches and all the different experts that you spoke with, what were some of the most surprising things that you learned about fat?
Yeah, I think that fat can control your brain. It can control your mind. It can control your metabolism. It can control your reproductive organs. You'd be surprised at what fat can do. It's almost a conductor of sorts, a conductor of activities in your body. So you should never underestimate your fats or the importance of it or the power of it. But one hormone that's really interesting is leptin, right? Leptin's been written about a lot. And your fat cells release leptin. It circulates in your bloodstream and it binds with areas of your hypothalamus. And once it's there, it can control your appetite. And also it binds to your skeletal muscles and pretty much tells your body that everything's okay in the world and your body can burn energy, as needed. Now, when you start to lose fat, you get a decrease in leptin, right? Because fat produces leptin, a decrease in it gives you less leptin. When your brain detects less leptin in circulation, it goes into overdrive, driving your appetite to eat more, right? So people who have lost, say, 10% of their body weight or more, they're much more driven to eat. Their brains are more excited by images of food. And this has been proven scientifically with fMRI images. And those areas of the brain responsible for self-control are less activated than a normal person. So a person losing weight is more driven to eat more, and they're less able to control themselves around food. And also, our muscles revert to a more efficient type of protein for burning calories. So you actually burn 22% fewer calories than somebody who's not lost weight, right? So it's not that fat people are lazy or dieters aren't exercising enough. They're actually not burning as much. Their body is designed in a way to try to maintain that fat once we try to lose it. So there's a penalty for yo-yo dieting, for going up and
Hmm.
down. So someone who say was at 170 pounds and lost 20 pounds to get to 150, when you compare their body to someone who's at 150 pounds naturally without having to lose weight to get there, the person who lost weight to get to 150 will actually burn 22% fewer calories and have to eat less than the person who's naturally at 150 pounds. And that person's also much more excited about food, right? So your body really wants that fat back. And the sad part about this is that this might not go away, this effect. It's been studied for about 6 years. And for
Hmm.
everybody, that effect didn't go away. They had a caloric penalty even at 6 years. So don't let it depress you. I know that can sound very depressing, but it is the truth. It's what our bodies are. So if you're struggling with weight and you find that you regain it really quickly after you lose some, this is the reason why. And now that, you know what you have to do. You really can't come off your diet. You will have to eat less than people around you. It's why I had to eat less than people around me. It's why I still love food and I love to look at food, but I can't eat it all. So now that you know that, let it empower you to know what you have to do. You have to find a diet you like that you can live with and stay on it. And you can't really go back to normal after this. You will have a caloric penalty for quite some time.
That's really interesting. And I think about, well, a lot of us during this period where many of us have transitioned to working from home during COVID-19. I've heard it called the COVID-19, is the weight gain that many of us have had just from sitting at home and having food nearby, but mainly just the downturn in physical activity, even something as basic as walking from the parking garage to your office building, right? We've lost that over the past year. And so what advice, based on your understanding of the biochemistry of, you know, of fat, what advice do you have for all of us that are trying to get back into better shape? What steps can we take that will really stick?
Yeah, it depends on where you are. So, in addition to the book, The Secret Life of Fat, I now have a course about the secret life of fat that kind of puts these learnings into action.
Mhm.
And so it depends on where you are on the fat spectrum, right? So, like I write about in the book as well, all these other ways we get fat that don't just have to do with overeating. There's all kinds of reasons why some people gain weight easier than others. One part is genetics, right? Fat is correlated to some genetics. There's some
Mhm.
specific genes that affect your fat, and there's even genotypes, like populations of people who will gain weight easier than others, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Where you are on the age spectrum matters as well. So we usually, when we're young, we have fat burning hormones running rampantly throughout our body. We have plenty of testosterone, plenty of estrogen, right? Plenty of growth hormone. And as you age, those hormones decline a lot. And so you're not burning the way you used to burn calories. You have less muscle mass, less bone mass. That's also going to affect it. Even your microbiome affects it. So the type of bacteria you have in your gut, there's some bacteria that will extract a lot of calories out of food and store it into fat. There's some bacteria that let food pass, right? People have more waste and they absorb less. So there's a number of components that have to do with weight gain. Overeating is an obvious one, but even if you feel like you're not overeating, yet you're getting fatter, there's a whole bunch of other reasons it could be as well. So you kind of have to diagnose your fat, figure out your fat blueprint, and so where you are on that will dictate what you have to do to lose the weight. So if you're a 22-year-old male saying you've gained 15 pounds at COVID, but you're otherwise healthy, it's going to be pretty easy to lose it. Honestly, you could go out for a run every day. You could cut out your processed food and carbs, and probably you'll lose that weight in just a few weeks. Now, if you are a middle-aged female, right, like I am, it's not going to be that easy. And I've yo-yo dieted in the past. So weight can get very, very stuck, right? You have less hormones, you're older, less of that fat burning tissue. For me, I've always felt there was a genetic component, which I think there is based on my ancestry. So I got to work a lot harder. It doesn't move right away. It can stay there for a month. And a lot of people I know have the same issue. So you have to kickstart it. You have to take advantage of this body of biochemistry that we are. We're like a bag of biochemistry. So how
Mhm.
can you use that now to kickstart weight loss? And really what you want to try to do is get up some of those fat burning hormones again. So growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, things like that. And so the more stubborn your fat is, the higher you have to ratchet up your efforts. I have found for really stubborn fat, intermittent fasting is a really good one, right?
Mhm.
Because It takes advantage of growth hormone, right? Our growth hormone levels peak at night while we're sleeping, and growth hormone is a really good fat burner. But when you eat, it actually mitigates the effect of growth hormone in your body. So if you eat close to bedtime or right after you wake up, your growth hormone levels are suddenly, the activity at less, the effectiveness of it is a little bit less. So if you can stop eating, say at 6 o'clock, eat nothing until about 9 or 10 o'clock the next day, it's more active, right? It can be more efficacious. So that's a good one. Exercise will become more important as well, right? So exercise also increases testosterone and growth hormone as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So doing regular exercise, but you have to ratchet up your efforts as you age and as you've had more fat and more yo-yo dieting, and you have to keep on it. When you're dealing with the biochemistry of your body, one signal that says, okay, well, we're okay now, there's enough, we're eating, it actually throws off the whole path and it can set you back for like a week or so. So all the little things become really important the older you get. And the book is filled of, it's full of 100 tips. So we can only go into it so much here. So I'm talking at a very high level. But really, you just have to get smarter with age. And if your fat is stubborn, you have to know the tricks about fat.
That's great. Well, let's talk about this concept of fat as an organ, which is something that you allude to in the book. What do you mean by that? And let's dive a little bit deeper into some of those hormones. Like how does fat regulate the body's actions?
Yeah, so when I say fat is an organ, that's because a lot of people think of fat as it's just extra calories that are stored in your body, right? And we know that's not true now. We know that it's actually releasing hormones, just like your pituitary gland releases hormones, your thyroid gland releases hormones. Fat is one of those organs that's releasing hormones. And that's what makes it an organ and not just a tissue, right? Is that it's actually active in our body. It's signaling to other organs in the body what to do, right? And it's taking signals back as well. And so that's what's meant by it's an organ. You can think of fat like skin. I think like a 1 square inch of skin is like a piece of skin tissue, right? Not a big deal. But skin in its totality all over our body also acts like an organ, and fat is the same way. So you got to respect it a little bit more, right, for what it is. It's not just a relic of the past that we don't need anymore because we have food everywhere. Like fat is doing more than just storing calories. And we talked about leptin, right? We talked about
Mm-hmm.
how it produces leptin. That's a key hormone it produces. It also produces other hormones that our body depends on. Adiponectin is another one. And then estrogen is another important one. And there's a whole host of others, and we don't have a very complete clarity on what all the hormones do. Fat research is fairly new. Probably started in the 1980s, 90s, as obesity grew. The NIH and other funding organizations started funding fat research more, diabetes research more. And with that added research came more insight about what fat really is. It wasn't really known before. And so our learnings about fat are fairly new, about how it interacts in our body, how it protects itself, how your body protects it, even using hormones and a number of other things. And so that's what is meant by fat as an organ, right? And we can talk about some of those other hormones as well, like adiponectin is an interesting one. But it's doing a number of things. It's very interactive. It's talking to your brain, talking to your bones. It's talking, right? It's talking through the hormones. It's releasing. It's signaling and controlling other organs in your body.
That's great. Well, one thing I'd like to go back to is this idea too of once you have a lot of weight gain, the shifts that your body has to go through to get back to your new normal. And for women, one of the greatest points of weight gain is pregnancy. And I'm wondering, are there changes also in hormone signaling following pregnancy, or how do we get rid of the baby fat? I guess the post pregnancy fat.
Yeah, and bodies have ways of dealing with this. In fact, I write about pregnancy, and I have a whole chapter on women versus men in the
Hmm.
book, because that was always something that vexed me, is that men seem to eat without any punishment. They eat a lot and they lose weight very quickly. Um, so like in the beginning of your body, your microbiome actually changes, right? In the beginning of a pregnancy, rather, right? In the beginning, there's not much change. Women can actually lose weight in the first couple of months.
Hmm.
But then afterward, your microbiome changes to a distribution of bacteria that actually will extract more calories out of food. So your body wants you to have some extra weight during pregnancy. And that maintains for a while. Then I think it finally, reaches a steady state. But then afterward, of course, yes, there's weight gain to deal with. lactation is a great way to
Hmm.
burn off that energy. And I think a lot of women who breastfeed afterward, it actually can go fairly quickly. And you might have looser skin, you might have other, things to deal with. But I feel like weight gain after pregnancy can be easier as well. I mean, one thing is pregnancy in general, there's an increase in something called angiogenesis, right? Where you have more vein blood supply to your
Hmm.
new fat. This happens even without pregnancy, honestly. The more fat you get, there's more signaling as well that, hey, there's all this new fat mass here, and we need blood supply, right? We need to now host it. And so veins will actually start growing in the direction of your new fats, and it'll start, right, and it becomes more pathways by which you can feed extra nutrients to fat and get even fatter. So yeah, I write about like fat begets fat, if you will, and fat loss begets fat loss. So this is one way fat begets fat, right? Is that you have more blood supply there, and especially after pregnancy, because you have higher angiogenesis in general during pregnancy, right? So you now have more ways of feeding your fat. So yeah, fat loss can be a little bit harder. I think for women who are pregnant, take advantage of breastfeeding. It's a great way to lose fat. It burns a lot of calories actually, but afterward you'll have to be more careful, and that's just the way it is. And you, no matter what, with age you have to be more careful, even if you never had a kid, right? You have to be more careful as you reach middle age years.
That's great. Yeah, it's such a there's so many different complex factors as you mentioned, microbiome, your gender, your age, your overall health. Um, all these seem to be influencers. So when it comes to the dinner plate, what can you tell us about tips um, with feeding behavior?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing is try to eat dinner early for one, right? If you're going to have dinner, like I said, I think intermittent fasting works really well if you have stubborn fat in particular,
Hmm.
right? And this has been kind of studied in a number of different areas, the circadian rhythms as well, right? We tend to pack on food more at night than you do in the morning. So eating late is bad. It's bad for growth hormone efficacy as well. So what you are going to eat, lower carbs at night for sure, right? If you can stay higher protein, higher fat, and lower carbs, I think that'll help. If you can make dinner your smaller meal of the day, that's also helpful. And then if you can just eat it really early, right? So I eat sometimes just a very small, it's almost a snack, right? At about 3 or 4 o'clock. And I don't eat again until the next day. And that's about the only way I can kind of maintain weight loss, right? And I'm middle aged, had 2 kids, have all these things I fight with. So that's what's been the most, I think, one of the best ways to do it. I mean, the other way, it doesn't work for everyone, especially if you like to have dinner with your family. So the other
Hmm.
thing to take into consideration, what diet works for you, right? And your lifestyle, because you will have to stay on this diet for a long time. If you have stubborn fat, you can't pick one that's faddish, right? That's something you
Hmm.
can for 6 months and then you think you can come off and be normal again, because you won't be able to be normal again. So if dinner is important to you, I've known people who've done other things. They eat almost, very little during the day, right? Maybe just like a piece of toast for breakfast, a yogurt for lunch, and then they'll go on and they'll have like a small, medium-sized dinner with their family, and they've been able to maintain weight too. So it's about prolonging the fast. That's just a different time that they actually eat. But I think actually eating early in the day has better effects. If you can do that, I think that's the better one, to stop at about, have your main meal before 2 o'clock and then something light, maybe a little bit later. But if you can't, right? And again, this has to work for you forever. So if you need to have dinner, have it. But then, keep your fast going in the morning if you can.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like, the idea of what's considered normal is also interesting because I think from culture to culture, a normal sized meal is very different. It can differ from cuisine to cuisine. And I would say in the Western diet, our concept of what is normal is, much larger than a typical meal in many other parts of the world. Also, the composition of those foods is important. So when it comes to the types of foods that you eat from a biochemistry perspective, what are the major offenders? Is it eating foods that are rich in fat, or is it more of eating foods that are rich in sugars and simple carbohydrates?
So I think that's been answered so many times, right? And all the latest
Mhm.
diet books that have come out and the research that comes out. I mean, certainly sugar is a really big culprit. And this is part of taking advantage of our biochemistry, because as we know, sugar provokes insulin. Insulin stores a lot of calories into your fat very quickly, right? But it's more to it than that, just that being that simplistic, I think, as far as the kind of food to eat. Our bodies react to foods differently. And there's research that shows this, right? There's some people who can eat, say, a muffin or a cookie, and they don't really get a blood sugar spike. They're fine. And there's some people who even have, like, they have a prune or a piece of fruit and their blood sugar spiking high.
Hmm.
So we all react differently to food. And some of that will be your past history of diet that you've had, how your body is tuned. Some of it could be genetic as well, right? So you have to tune into your own body and what you can and can't eat. There's obvious offenders, sugar, right? Flour, things like that, white flour. Those are clearly, I think, for any body type, going to help you gain weight. But what's your tolerance for some sugar? Some people are different. There are people who can have, yogurt's full of sugar, but they can eat yogurts, they can eat some sweets. And we see this all the time around us, right? We see these people being able to eat this and they're not getting fat. That doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. You might have a
Hmm.
body very sensitive to any kind of carbohydrate that loves to put out insulin all the time and store and put everything away. And then you have to decide that for yourself. And a good way to figure it out is keeping a really tight food log. Right? What do you eat every day? Right? What is the caloric content? And what do you weigh every day? And you'll start to see things that help your weight loss and things that hurt it. I know I've learned what I can get away with. There's some foods that are supposed to be horrible, and oh my gosh, you should never eat them because it causes high hypoglycemic index. But it doesn't happen to me. Like a banana is supposed to be terrible for dieting, and yet I can seem to eat this and nothing bad happens to me. So
Hmm.
keep a log, and you'll start to understand. There's obvious ones. Stay away from, a lot of sugars and flours, right? Um, and then but then there's probably variation, like what other things that you can have. And then I know there's high fat diets out there, the keto diets, things like that. I think those work if you're not having sugars and flours with them. So it's all about what's the mix of
Hmm.
chemicals you're putting in your body. So if you want to have high fats, then you probably shouldn't have much carbohydrate with that at all, because that's what's going to make all those fats now go into your, get absorbed into your fat tissue, right? But then if you want to have sugars, then you probably shouldn't have a lot of high fats, because those fats would go right into your fat tissue again. So you can do either or, it seems like. And there are diets that are more revolving around bread, right? But they tend to be lower fat because, for a reason, because it depends on the mix of calories that you're getting. So you can pick one of the extreme diets and probably do okay. If you like to mix it up though, right? You like to have some fats and some carbs, which is kind of the bucket I'm in, then I think the intermittent fasting piece works better, because you have more food latitude when you're doing fasting. You can kind of eat a little bit of what you want when you are eating, as long as you have that fasting window.
Hmm.
And so it's personality driven. Some people are okay with, just selecting 20 foods or so they can eat and shopping around that and preparing foods, and they can eat all day and they can do okay. But if you're more like me, where I don't want to have to think about it all the time, I want to eat what I want to
Yeah.
eat sometimes, right? Then I think the fasting period works better, because I can have more food latitude in what I do eat. And I can even cheat a little bit. If there's something I'm dying to have that I really want, I could have it in that window in a moderate amount, and I don't actually gain weight as long as I do that fasting period.
Great. That's great. So, what's next on your plans for work and writing in this area?
Yeah, I think I've gotten much more interested in the psychology of food and weight loss, right? Because
Hmm.
that's almost the biggest barrier you have to solve first before food starts mattering, because we all know what to do. I mean, dieting's been around for 100 years. There's been tons of diet books, and um, but it's almost, how do you get there? How do you start? Right? How do you get yourself to want to be this new person and go on what is really a kind of life-changing journey, if you will? And it's not a light undertaking. I think a lot of us can lose 5 or 10 pounds. Do we stay there? Right? And what does it
Mm.
say there? And there's some research done. There's a National Weight Control Registry where they study people who've had success with long-term weight loss, and what do they do to get there. And there's a lot of effort applied. Like, they actually do keep a log. They log their food very consistently. They weigh themselves consistently. They exercise consistently. If they gain a couple pounds, they take it right off. Right. So it's a matter of being on it all the time. And the problem with doing that is that you get tired of this, right? You get
Mhm.
tired of a life that's so constricted, and I just want to let loose and, have a beer and a pizza or whatever, right? So like, there's a process of building up your mental muscle, if you will, to be able to stay on this restriction forever, every day. And it's a hard one to do, because in order to do it, you almost have to give yourself breaks. there's research now showing that people who like stay on like a regimented behavior pattern, it starts to wear off after a while, and they get, a little lazier and they let loose, like doctors in hospitals who are told to wash their hands all the time, wash your hands. They notice that towards the end of the day they do it less, they just get tired of it. But if
Hmm.
you give them breaks during the day, they'll actually continue to wash their hands for longer, right? And so there's something around giving yourself a break, yet not going down a slippery slope of losing all of your right progress
Hmm.
today and getting back on the same kind of zeal that you had before. And how do you get back on quickly? I think that's the missing piece in psychology for anything, for any kind of behavior modification. And when I talk to coaches, people who do medical weight loss, like at Tufts University and Joslin Center, and coaches, right, personal coaches as well,
Hmm.
women have a harder time with this than men. This is an interesting thing. When they go off a diet, they tend to beat themselves off a lot. Like, I went off my diet, I'm terrible, I failed, right? It's something called
Hmm.
dichotomous thinking. If I didn't have a perfect day, I had a failed day and I'm a failure. And it makes it hard for them to get back on, right? So they,
Yeah.
they go off the rails. Whereas guys will be like, yeah, I had a beer. All right, so what? Let's just get back on it today, right? There's more of an emotional component here. And so if you can, and part of the value some of these coaches bring to their patients or clients is that they coach them to get back on right away, right? Like, you don't want to lose
Yeah.
all your progress because you had an ice cream. It's okay to have an ice cream. Let's get back on. Let's not lose all the progress. But if that coach isn't there, a lot of these people don't come back. They went off the rails and now they're depressed and now they feel like a loser and they can't get back on. So that piece of it, of like how to get back on quickly, it seems trivial, but I don't think it is. I think that's a really hard part, because it seems like from the research on behaviors that you have to give yourself a break here or there. Okay, now how do you not cause that to ruin everything you just accomplished by going down a slippery slope? So anyway, that's my latest area of research and interest, is more the psychology. And I think especially because of COVID, because research also shows that when we're under stressful times, like a recession or a depression, candy
Hmm.
sales go up high. Like
Oh, I
there's,
bet.
yeah, there's only a certain amount of stress it seems like we're able to take. And
Hmm.
COVID, we're out of control. You're stuck inside. I can't go out. I can't go here. I can't go there. I don't know what the future is, right? There's just like a depression or recession. There's a certain amount of uncertainty here, and I don't know what's going to happen. And that situation, stressful situations, make people want to control themselves less. And in a way, it's just like those doctors in the hospital. Like, if I have to do this all the time and I'm tired of doing this, like, I just don't want to do this thing anymore. It translates to also, eating, right? So people have a lot of weight gain. Part of it is, it's not just, I mean, we all knew what to do. We could have all still exercised. We could have all not eaten out of our fridge all day, but we kind of did anyway.
Yeah.
It's stress related. And so then, the whole thing around stress and weight gain, and even though you know the right thing to do, why you don't do it, that's a really interesting area. And I don't think it's trivial.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about other changes too across the population. Alcohol consumption went way up during COVID, and that's also a huge source of calories for people. They may not realize how much, in addition to the other damaging factors of overconsumption of alcohol, it also makes you fat. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And I think there's lack of entertainment. You can go out and see a
mhm,
movie. So what can I do? I can have a drink and,
mhm,
talk on the phone or whatever. And so many things led to that. But I do think part of it was being out of control and that feeling
yeah.
of that. And yeah, there's a lot of, I have actually a whole chapter in the book and in the course as well. It's called Mind Over Fat. So I started looking into it for this book. And
Mhm.
the more you ask people to exert themselves, the more tired they get, and they tend to give up. Like, there's one where they ask people to hold a hand gripper for a long time,
Mhm.
and they have two groups of people, and they give them a break of holding the hand gripper. And for one group of people, they go and they show them a sad movie. The other group, they show them a happy movie, right? And the group that has the happy movie, they're able to get back to the exercise and hold a hand gripper for longer than the one that's shown the sad movie. The one that's shown the sad movie, they just like whatever, like they don't feel like holding this gripper anymore. And it's not unlike dieting, because like the hand gripper, dieting is a prolonged effort, right? Where you're doing this for
Yeah.
a while. So you have to have some happy moments in there, right? Or else you're
Mhm.
not going to want to be on this prolonged one. And then these people in that database I talked about, the National Weight Control Registry, there's something that galvanized them to start. And a lot of times it was they had a diagnosis, like it was serious. They can't go
Mm.
on. the way they
Mhm.
are. And that in itself might keep them on this prolonged way. They know what the alternative is. The other trigger seems to be they got a picture of themselves, right, where they look by far heavier than they ever
Mhm.
thought they were. Their mind never registered they had gotten this heavy. So it was a shock. And
Yeah.
that shock, whether a diagnosis or a picture of yourself, it was just this big wake up call of what am I doing? And so that actually I think also helps them stay on this really prolonged mission, right? This control of every day they're at this and they don't come off because they know what the alternative is. So how do we start right on the path and how do we stay on the path? That's a really important one because I think so many diet books have been out there. We all kind of know what to do, right? But we don't do it, right? We come off all the
Yeah.
time, and it's more
Well,
mental.
I think, with the influence of the biochemical influence of these hormones and also the impact it has on our feelings and our state of mind,
Yeah.
um, and the psychological struggles of really sticking with new patterns. I guess one one concern I have, from a nutrition and kind of mental health perspective is, where do you draw the line though between doing something that's good for your health versus being worried about moving into that realm of eating disorders, right? Because I think, I'm not an expert in psychology by any means, but I worry about that too. It's like, can we become too obsessive about our food to the point where it becomes a clinical problem? How do we stay in that zone of like this is good for me and not getting into that other
Yeah.
arena?
Yeah. And I mean, food disorders is a type of anxiety a lot of time, right? You get
Mhm.
worried about it. And actually, like anorexia has been around for a long time. I think the
Mhm.
first case was the Middle Ages. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with
Yeah.
diet and keeping weight off. It's kind of an issue unto itself. Some people have a lot of anxiety. It manifests itself in a form of food and control and being afraid of food now, right?
Mhm.
Something
Mhm.
like that. So for some people, but mostly not, right? Mostly
Mhm.
people do not have that response. But for some people, it can go into obsession. And I think you have to know yourself a little bit to decide then which diet do you want to stay on. And any diet can make you go into that mode. It's not even just intermittent fasting. Right. I think when I wrote the book, some people thought I had an eating disorder, but I don't. Like
Mhm.
literally, I don't. I have no problem gaining weight. But it could be like for some people it could trigger that, but then any diet can trigger that, right? Just counting
Yeah.
your calories can trigger that. And so I think, you kind of have to, again, just be wary of your own responses to what you're doing. Are you getting obsessive about it? Are you restricting more? Are you over exercising? Are you, just completely consumed with losing weight? Everything has to be in a balance. And if you're on any of that, and even if it's manifesting in other places, other types of obsessive compulsive disorder that you're seeing, it's just something to be careful of that it doesn't start to manifest in your diet. And if you think it does, then you should certainly see a specialist or an eating disorder specialist. But I mean, I think that the vast many of millions of people who are overweight would tell you that's not happening far and wide. I think there's a small percentage where it
Yeah.
could trigger that behavior, but that if you have a propensity for that behavior, it's there even if you don't diet, right? Or even if
Yeah.
you pick a different diet where you eat all day, but you eat a certain type of food, it's always going to be there and should be treated.
Yeah. I guess for my personal journey, I try to think about, you know, how how can I do things that are supportive of health in general that makes my body feel good? So not to get too caught up in body image and more about how do I feel? Am I able to walk for a certain distance? Am I able to sleep well? Like, what are the things that make my body feel good? And really, like you said, becoming tuned in into what your body feels like. I think a lot of us kind of ignore those signals, and so just being more aware is an important step to that. Um,
Yeah, for sure. And while you're losing weight, though, you might not feel great, right? That's just a
mhm.
kind of a transition you're going through. So, I mean, there's times where I get more tired, especially in the beginning of a diet, right? Times I'm more tired, and my body's clamoring to get my fat back. So you have to be. That's why it's important to be conscious of some of the research I write about,
Mhm.
because you will get obsessive about food. You will feel perhaps tired because your body's adjusting to this new normal.
Yeah.
In some way, fat is our signal to our brains on what's going on in our environment. So if our fat's detecting, hey, there's less food, I'm not storing as much fat, or my fat's decreasing, it's a
Mhm.
big signal to our ancestral brains that there's a problem in the environment, and you should be very, very worried, right? You
Yeah.
should go seeking food, and every calorie you find, you should eat it, right? And you should stop exercising. In fact, we're now going to switch to a different muscle cell that's actually going to burn, a muscle protein that's going to burn less calories. Like, oh my gosh, like, and because think of all the famine, right, that went on, war,
Oh,
famine, all kinds
absolutely.
of starvation, and our like genetic past that we carry with us. And so, I couldn't guarantee that when you go on a diet, you're not going to feel some discomfort. And so you do have to get through that period. And you might never feel, I hate to say, as great, right, as when you used to eat whatever you felt like, because that felt really good. But long term, that also has consequences, right? There's heart disease and diabetes and things to worry about.
Yeah.
So it's a compromise, right? It's what can I live with, as far as happiness with food and how I feel, and what is my body, what state is it in right now? And you don't want to be tortured every day, but it might not be as fun as when we were teenagers and could eat whatever we felt like, right?
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Sylvia, where can our audience find out more about your book and also your course? Where can we direct them?
Yeah, so the course is available at my website. It's www.thesecretlifeoffat.com, and you can download it there. The book is also available on Amazon, and so that's good. And I'm on Facebook. I'm at Sylvia Tara PhD on Facebook and Twitter, so you can reach me there as well.
Great. Well, this was really, really an interesting conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you for coming on the show.
Great, thank you. Good to be here.
You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious, recorded on Skype. You can find this and all of our other episodes at the foodiepharmacology.com website. You can also find the video of this episode at our YouTube channel at Teach Ethnobotany in the Foodie Pharmacology playlist. We are also on Apple Podcasts. Please go on to the Apple Podcast if you don't mind and give us a rating and maybe a comment or two. That would be really amazing to help boost our reach to a broader audience. Thanks so much to our show's producers, to Rob Cohen and Christine Roth, for their support from Co-Conspiracy Entertainment. And thank you to you, our listeners. Stay healthy out there. I'll see you next week.